Hello everyone, this is AppleKnows channel, and today I'm taking you into a journey through transportation facts so unbelievable that you might think they're made up. But I promise you, everything I'll tell you is real, and once you hear them, you'll never look at trains, planes, or even everyday vehicles the same way again. Let's start with something that sounds like science fiction. Did you know there's a subway station in Pyongyang, North Korea, that's so deep underground it could double as a nuclear bunker? The system is buried more than 110 meters below the surface. To put that in perspective, that's deeper than a 30-story building is tall. The escalators are so long that it takes about 4 minutes just to reach the platforms. Imagine waiting for your train and knowing you're basically inside a fortress designed for survival. Now let's move to the skies. Most people believe planes are delicate machines that can't risk flying with just one engine. But the truth is shocking. There are aircraft certified to fly more than 5.5 hours on just a single working engine. This rule is called ETOPS, and it allows planes to cross oceans even if one engine fails. There have been real situations where pilots lost one engine over the Atlantic and still made it safely to land after flying hundreds of kilometers. It sounds terrifying, but it's proof of how advanced aviation engineering really is. Speaking of the skies, commercial airplanes don't fly straight from point A to point B. Instead, they follow curved routes that actually look bizarre if you trace them on a flat map. For example, a flight from New York to Tokyo often arcs far over Alaska. It looks longer, but in reality it's shorter because the Earth is a sphere, and pilots use what's called the Great Circle route. Passengers often don't realize they're closer to the Arctic than to the Pacific while sipping their drinks mid-flight. Let's get down to the roads for a fact that will blow your mind. In the Netherlands, there's a highway that literally runs under a river while ships sail above it. It's called the Veluwemeer Aqueduct, and it looks like an optical illusion. Cars drive underneath while massive vessels glide across the water overhead. Instead of building a drawbridge or tunnel, engineers created this surreal piece of infrastructure that seems impossible at first glance. And speaking of surreal, Japan's trains are so punctual that a delay of even 1 minute requires an official apology from the staff. In one case, a Japanese railway company issued a written apology to passengers because a train left the station 20 seconds early. Imagine that, 20 seconds off schedule, and the company felt it was a serious mistake. Compare that to delays we face elsewhere in the world, sometimes measured in hours, and you realize how extraordinary their system is. Now here's something most people don't know: the London Underground isn't just a transportation system, it's also home to hidden ghost stations. Dozens of stations were built, used for a while, and then abandoned. Some served as shelters during World War II, protecting civilians from bombings, while others were transformed into secret government facilities. Today, they're sealed off, dark, and silent, but still exist beneath the city's streets like forgotten time capsules of history. And one last fact for now, though I have countless more waiting: the fastest train in regular commercial service today runs in China and uses magnetic levitation technology. It can reach speeds of over 430 kilometers per hour, floating above the track with no wheels, no friction, just magnets holding tons of steel and passengers in the air. When you're on board, it feels like sliding on glass, yet you're moving faster than a small airplane during takeoff. These are just the beginning of the truths about transportation that most people don't realize. The world around us is filled with machines and systems so advanced, so bizarre, and so hidden in plain sight, that once you learn them, you'll never see your daily commute the same way again. Have you ever thought about the idea of airplanes carrying more fuel than passengers? The Airbus A380, the world's largest passenger plane, can store around 320,000 liters of fuel. That's so much liquid that if you poured it into average cars, it could fill up more than 5,000 tanks. To put it another way, if you left the fuel door open, it would take about 6 hours for a standard gas station pump to fill it up. The sheer scale of aviation fuel consumption is something we almost never think about as passengers, but it's staggering. Now let's talk about ships, because the oceans hold some unbelievable secrets too. The largest container ships in the world are longer than the Empire State Building is tall. These floating giants can carry more than 20,000 shipping containers at once. Imagine a city block stacked with metal boxes, each filled with goods, cars, electronics, and clothing, all moving across the seas at once. And here's the twist: one of these ships produces more pollution in a year than tens of thousands of cars combined. It's a hidden cost of globalization that most people don't realize when they click buy online. On land, there's a road in Bolivia called the Yungas Road, often nicknamed Death Road. It's so narrow, winding, and dangerous that hundreds of people used to die there each year. Picture a single-lane dirt track with sheer cliffs on one side, no guardrails, and fog so thick you can barely see a few meters ahead. Trucks, buses, and bicycles all used it, often meeting head-on with nowhere to pass. It became infamous as one of the most dangerous roads on Earth, a place where a single mistake could mean a drop of hundreds of meters into the jungle below. But danger doesn't only live in mountains. In Venice, Italy, the entire city is a form of transportation art. There are no cars or roads, just canals and boats. The Venetian gondolas, those sleek black boats tourists love, are actually built with asymmetry. One side is slightly longer than the other to compensate for the gondolier rowing on just one side. If they were perfectly balanced, the gondola would constantly turn in circles. It's a subtle design trick, invisible to most eyes, but crucial for keeping the boat straight. Back to the skies for a truly shocking fact: most commercial planes carry handcuffs and even restraints on board. Why? Because if a passenger becomes uncontrollable, violent, or even dangerous, the crew has the legal right to restrain them mid-flight. Flight attendants are trained not only in safety and first aid but also in methods of dealing with extreme passenger behavior. It's something we rarely see, but it's there in case of emergencies, proof that the cabin is far more prepared than most realize. Now let's look at trains again. In Switzerland, there's a railway tunnel called the Gotthard Base Tunnel that runs 57 kilometers straight through the Alps. It's the longest railway tunnel in the world, and trains pass through mountains of solid rock at speeds over 200 kilometers per hour. Building it took nearly 2 decades, involved thousands of workers, and cost billions. And yet, when you ride it, you barely notice the marvel around you. It just feels like an ordinary train ride, even though you're inside the heart of a mountain range. And here's one that will truly bend your mind: in some parts of the world, railroads and airports aren't just for transport, they're also for farming. In Japan, one airport actually grows rice in the fields surrounding its runways. Farmers work there seasonally, and airplanes take off and land right next to growing crops. It's an astonishing coexistence of modern technology and ancient tradition, where jumbo jets and rice paddies share the same horizon. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Let's dive into transportation facts that start to get even stranger, even darker, the kind that make you sit back and say, wait, that can't possibly be real. But it is. Let's start in the skies with one of the most unsettling truths of aviation. Commercial airplanes are struck by lightning far more often than you'd expect, on average, once per year per plane. That means every passenger jet you've ever flown on has almost certainly been hit by lightning at some point in its life. Pilots usually don't even mention it because modern aircraft are designed to conduct the electricity safely around the fuselage and out the tail. But imagine sitting in your seat, sipping your drink, while thousands of volts of electricity surge across the outside of the plane. It happens far more often than you think. On the ground, let's talk about the Paris metro. Beneath the glamorous streets of the city lies an abandoned network of ghost stations, many of which are still intact. During World War II, some were converted into bomb shelters. Today, some remain locked away, completely frozen in time, with posters from the 1930s still glued to the walls. It's like walking into a portal of history, but sealed beneath millions of footsteps every day. Here's a road fact that feels like a horror story. In the US, there's a highway called I-80 that stretches more than 4,600 kilometers across the country. Parts of it are so isolated that you can drive for hours without seeing another car, gas station, or even a town. Truckers call these stretches the loneliest roads, and many report hallucinations after endless hours behind the wheel. The human brain isn't built for that kind of monotony, and some drivers describe seeing phantom animals or even entire ghostly cars in the distance. And speaking of isolation, let's go to sea. The shipping industry has a secret nickname: the invisible backbone of the world. Around 90% of global trade moves by sea, but here's the chilling part: at any given moment, there are an estimated 50,000 cargo ships scattered across the oceans, and many of them operate beyond the reach of law enforcement. This means incidents like smuggling, human trafficking, and even mysterious disappearances can happen in these floating cities without immediate accountability. The ocean swallows not just ships but stories, many of which never make the news. Back to trains for something that feels surreal. In India, the rail network is so massive that it carries more than 20 million passengers every single day. That's the population of an entire large country moving daily on rails. But here's the shocking twist: the Indian Railways is also one of the world's largest employers, with over 1 million workers. Entire families for generations have lived, worked, and even died around the tracks. For some communities, the railway isn't just transport, it's life itself. And then there's an eerie fact about airports. Denver International Airport in the US is larger than the island of Manhattan. But what makes it infamous isn't just its size, it's the endless conspiracy theories about hidden underground bunkers beneath it. While most of those theories lack proof, what is real is that the airport does have a vast network of underground tunnels, originally built for a baggage system that never worked properly. Today, much of it remains unused, raising endless speculation about what might actually happen in those shadowy spaces out of public view. Finally, here's a detail that shocks almost everyone the first time they hear it. The escalators in the Moscow metro are so long and steep that some stations feel like descending into a science fiction movie. One station, Park Pavdi, has escalators that are over 125 meters long. If the escalator breaks, it can take more than 10 minutes to climb the stairs back to the surface. It's both an engineering marvel and a psychological experience, reminding you just how far underground some of these systems go. Transportation is supposed to be simple: cars, trains, planes, ships. But the truth is, the deeper you look, the more unsettling, extraordinary, and unbelievable the facts become. Let's open the door to transportation facts that not only surprise but also unsettle, the kind of truths that stick in your head long after you've heard them. Let's begin with airplanes, because here's a fact that makes many people pause. Passenger planes are designed with ashtrays in the bathrooms, even though smoking has been banned for decades. Why? Because airlines know some people will break the rules, and if they do, there has to be a safe place to put out a cigarette. The design is a hidden acknowledgement of human behavior, aviation engineering quietly preparing for disobedience. Now on to roads. There is a stretch of highway in Australia called the Air Highway, which includes the world's longest straight road, 146 kilometers without a single curve. Drivers often report a sense of unreality while traveling it, as if they're trapped in a loop, because nothing in their field of vision changes for more than an hour. Some even say the monotony is so strong it feels hypnotic. This isn't just psychological, scientists call it highway hypnosis, where drivers zone out so deeply they keep driving without consciously realizing it. At sea, let's look at something few people ever consider: abandoned ships. The ocean is littered with ghost ships, real vessels that are left adrift. One infamous case is the MV Lyubov Orlova, a cruise ship that was cut loose in 2013 and drifted across the Atlantic for years. It was reportedly carrying nothing but rats, which, according to experts, had likely turned to cannibalism to survive. Imagine a steel giant, crewless, silently floating on the ocean, inhabited only by swarms of desperate animals. Speaking of rail, here's a story from Japan. The Seikan Tunnel, which connects the islands of Honshu and Hokkaido, is the longest undersea tunnel in the world. But it wasn't built only for transportation, it was built because ferries traveling the same route had sunk in violent storms, killing hundreds of people. The tunnel was born out of tragedy, carved through solid rock beneath the seabed to prevent future disasters. Every time a train passes through, it's not just an engineering achievement, it's a memorial to those who didn't survive the waves. Now let's talk about cars, because here's something most people have never realized: the average car spends 95% of its lifetime parked. That means we build entire cities with roads, garages, and parking lots, shaping our environments around machines that sit idle almost all the time. The car feels like freedom, but in reality, it spends its life waiting. Airports hide something else unusual. The busiest airport in the world, Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, handles over 100 million passengers per year. That's more people than live in most countries. But here's the strange fact: it became the busiest not because Atlanta is the most visited city, but because it's designed as a hub, meaning millions of passengers walk through it without ever wanting to go to Atlanta at all. In other words, the city's fame comes not from itself, but from being a middle step in the global machine of movement. And finally, something that brings us back underground. In New York City, subway tunnels have hidden chambers that were built during the Cold War as nuclear fallout shelters. Some are stocked with decades-old supplies, cans of crackers, drums of water, even first aid kits, forgotten relics sealed behind locked doors. Millions ride past them daily without realizing entire survival caches exist just out of sight. Let's walk straight into the chilling side of transportation, the accidents, the forgotten mistakes, and the rules that exist only because disasters force them into being. Let's start with aviation. In 1983, Air Canada Flight 143 ran out of fuel midair due to a metric conversion mistake. The plane was supposed to be filled with 22,300 kilograms of fuel but was instead given 22,300 pounds, less than half of what it needed. At 41,000 feet, both engines died. Imagine the silence. The pilots, with no power and no thrust, had to glide a massive Boeing 767 down like a paper plane. Against all odds, they landed safely on an abandoned airstrip in Gimli, Manitoba, earning the nickname the Gimli Glider. That single incident is why fuel checks in aviation today are obsessively strict. Now to the railways. In 1915, in the French Alps, a military train carrying over 1,000 soldiers returning from the Italian front lost control on a steep descent. The brakes failed, and the train derailed at high speed, bursting into flames. More than 400 soldiers died, making it one of the deadliest rail disasters in history. The tragedy was so catastrophic that the French government kept details secret for years, fearing the impact on wartime morale. Today, the crash is still remembered quietly, a grim reminder of how fragile even the strongest machines can be. On the seas, few disasters are as infamous as the sinking of the MV Dona Paz in 1987 near the Philippines. It collided with a tanker carrying thousands of gallons of oil, sparking an inferno that consumed the ship. Over 4,000 people died, making it the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history. The horrifying truth? The ship was so overcrowded that no one even knows the exact number of passengers on board. It was a floating city turned into a mass grave within minutes. Now let's return to roads. In 1969, in Italy, the Morandi Bridge in Genoa collapsed while cars and trucks were crossing. Entire vehicles were thrown into the void. But here's what shocks experts most: engineers had been warning about the bridge's structural weaknesses for years. It's a sobering truth about infrastructure: we usually learn lessons only after tragedy forces us to. Even airports hide stories like this. In 1977, on the island of Tenerife, two Boeing 747s collided on the runway in thick fog. Nearly 600 people died, making it the deadliest accident in aviation history. The crash happened not in the air but on the ground, because of miscommunication between pilots and air traffic control. Today, aviation language is standardized worldwide. When a pilot says "cleared for takeoff," it has to be crystal clear, because one misunderstood phrase once cost hundreds of lives. And here's one that few people know. In 1943, during World War II, a train carrying civilians in Italy entered a long tunnel near Balvano. The train was overloaded, and the locomotives burned low-quality coal, producing thick smoke. Inside the tunnel, passengers suffocated silently from carbon monoxide. When rescuers finally entered, they found hundreds dead in their seats, as if frozen mid-journey. The disaster was hushed up during the war, but the tunnel still exists today, a grim relic of tragedy. These accidents may sound like dark history, but they explain why transportation is so tightly regulated now. Every rule, every signal, every safety demonstration comes from someone else's nightmare-turned-lesson. Let's step into the shadows of transportation history, the experiments and designs so extreme, dangerous, or bizarre that most people have never heard of them, because many were abandoned, banned, or quietly buried. Let's begin with aviation. In the 1950s and 60s, the United States actually experimented with nuclear-powered airplanes. The concept was terrifying: reactors inside the aircraft generating heat to propel engines, theoretically allowing the plane to stay in the air for weeks without refueling. But here's the problem: what happens if one crashes? A nuclear explosion in the sky. The project was eventually cancelled, but test reactors were built, and some of the prototypes came dangerously close to actual flight. The idea of nuclear-powered passenger flights was not only considered, it nearly became reality. On the seas, engineers once tested aircraft carriers made of ice. During World War II, a project called Habakkuk aimed to build massive floating airstrips in the North Atlantic by mixing ice with wood pulp to create a material called pykrete. It was strong, buoyant, and, incredibly, it didn't melt easily. The plan was to create floating runways bigger than cities, immune to torpedoes. Though prototypes worked, the idea was abandoned because steel production eventually caught up. But for a moment in history, humanity was preparing to fight wars on giant blocks of ice. Now to rail. In the 1960s, the United States experimented with a project called the M497 Black Beetle, a jet-powered train. Engineers strapped actual jet engines from a bomber plane onto a railcar and sent it flying down the tracks at nearly 300 kilometers per hour. It worked, but the noise was deafening, the fuel costs were enormous, and there was no practical reason to use jet engines instead of traditional locomotives. The train was shelved, but it still holds the U.S. speed record for rail. On roads, there was once a car so dangerous that it was outright banned. In 1971, the Ford Pinto became infamous after tests revealed its fuel tank could explode in rear-end collisions. The placement of the tank meant even a low-speed crash could turn the car into a fireball. Instead of recalling the cars immediately, internal documents revealed the company calculated the cost of lawsuits versus fixing the design. The Pinto became a symbol of profit being placed above safety, and the scandal permanently changed automotive regulations worldwide. And here's something many don't know about airports. In the 1950s, engineers considered building circular runways, literally giant loops, like racetracks, where planes could land from any direction depending on the wind. Prototypes were drawn up, and even small-scale tests proved possible. But the idea never took off, because the banking needed on the outer edges was too extreme, and the costs of construction were astronomical. Still, to this day, some futurists argue that circular runways could solve congestion problems at busy airports. Ships hold another strange chapter. In the 1970s, scientists experimented with hovercraft ferries, massive, floating platforms that could carry hundreds of passengers across the English Channel while skimming on a cushion of air. They worked, and people used them, but the noise was so loud it shattered windows along the coast, and the maintenance costs were brutal. Eventually, they were retired, leaving behind eerie images of gigantic hovercraft that look like science fiction made real. And finally, here's one that blends horror with transportation history. During the Cold War, secret underground subway lines were rumored to exist beneath Moscow and Washington, connecting government bunkers with airports. In Moscow, this system is often called Metro 2, a hidden network allegedly running deeper than the public subway, designed to transport leaders in case of nuclear war. The government has never officially confirmed its existence, but enough evidence has surfaced from defectors and construction workers to suggest that beneath the city, another city of tunnels exists, invisible to the millions who ride the metro every day. Transportation isn't just about moving people, it's about power, survival, and experiments that sometimes push so close to disaster that we're lucky they never became part of daily life. This is AppleKnows channel, and if you've stayed with me through all these layers of truth, you've seen how transportation is not just about wheels, wings, and engines, it's about human ambition, mistakes, survival, and sometimes secrets we were never supposed to know. From nuclear-powered airplanes that almost took to the skies, to ghost stations sealed beneath cities, to tragedies that rewrote safety rules forever, transportation has always been more than movement. It's a mirror of how far we'll go, how much we'll risk, and how deeply we hide our failures. The next time you step onto a train, board a plane, or even drive your car, remember this: beneath the ordinary journey lies a history full of experiments, accidents, and ideas so wild they could have changed the world if they hadn't been stopped. And some are still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to resurface. This has been AppleKnows channel, where the facts you thought you knew about the world of transport turn out to be stranger, darker, and more fascinating than fiction. Stay curious, because the journey never really ends.